My name is Alexa, 28 years old, and I'm standing frozen at my parents' 30th anniversary party, watching my entire world shatter. In front of 200 guests, my mother raised her champagne glass and said the words that changed everything. "We wish our younger daughter Sophia was our only child." The crystal flute slipped from my fingers, exploding against the marble floor as every head turned to stare. My sister Sophia's lips curved into that familiar triumphant smirk, while my husband Jake's hand found mine, squeezing tight. Before we dive into how I discovered the shocking truth behind my family's betrayal and what happened when I finally fought back, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family or dealt with toxic relatives who played favorites, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family drama. Trust me, what comes next will show you exactly why sometimes the best family is the one you choose, not the one you're born into. Let's get into this wild ride of deception, betrayal, and ultimately, sweet justice. Looking back now, I should have seen this coming from the moment Sophia entered our lives when I was 5 years old. The day my parents brought her home from the hospital, something fundamental shifted in our family dynamic. Where once I had been daddy's little girl and mommy's helper, suddenly I became invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of family photos while Sophia glowed in the center like a tiny sun that everyone orbited around. The favoritism started small, but grew into something monstrous over the years. When I brought home straight A's on my report card, my parents would glance at it briefly before asking if I'd helped Sophia with her homework. Meanwhile, when Sophia managed to scrape by with C's, they'd throw a celebration dinner at her favorite restaurant, praising her for trying so hard and overcoming challenges. I remember sitting at those dinners, my perfect grades forgotten, watching them shower her with rewards for mediocrity while my excellence was expected and ignored. The double standards became more painful as we grew older. When I was 16, I begged for a car, even offering to pay half with money I'd saved from my part-time job at the local bookstore. My parents lectured me about responsibility and told me that taking the bus would build character. 6 months later, on Sophia's 16th birthday, they surprised her with a brand new Honda Civic, complete with a big red bow. She hadn't worked a day in her life, but apparently, she needed reliable transportation for her social life. College was where the disparity became truly cruel. I'd worked myself to exhaustion to earn a full art scholarship to NYU, one of the most competitive programs in the country. The night I got my acceptance letter, I ran downstairs, tears of joy streaming down my face, ready to share this incredible achievement with my family. My mother barely looked up from where she was braiding Sophia's hair. "That's nice, dear," she said absently. "But how will you afford living in New York? You know we can't help with expenses." 2 years later, when Sophia got accepted to community college with a 2.3 GPA, my parents threw a party that rivaled most weddings. They invited extended family, hired caterers, and gave a speech about how proud they were of their brilliant daughter's academic journey. Then they announced they'd be paying her full tuition, room and board, and giving her a monthly allowance so she could focus on her studies without distractions. I worked 3 jobs through college to survive. I cleaned offices at night, tutored other students between classes, and spent weekends working at a gallery in Soho. My feet bled from standing so long, I survived on ramen and hope, and I fell asleep in the library more times than I could count. Meanwhile, Sophia posted Instagram photos of her spring break trips to Cancun and shopping sprees at Nordstrom, all funded by our parents who constantly told me I was learning valuable life lessons through my struggles. The photos were perhaps the most insidious form of favoritism. In every family portrait, Sophia was front and center, usually sitting on our father's lap or wrapped in our mother's arms, while I stood slightly apart, often partially cut out of the frame. Sometimes I wasn't even told when they were taking professional photos. I'd come home from school to find them dressed up, returning from a photo session at the park. "Oh, we didn't want to bother you," my mother would say. "We know how busy you are with your studies." But not everyone in the family was blind to this treatment. Grandma Rose, my father's mother, saw everything with clear eyes. She'd pull me aside during family gatherings, pressing $50 bills into my hand and whispering, "For groceries, sweetheart. Don't let them know." She'd ask about my art, really listening when I talked about my projects and dreams. When other relatives gushed over Sophia's latest average accomplishment, Grandma Rose would loudly proclaim that I was the most talented grandchild she had. When Grandma Rose passed away during my senior year of college, I was devastated. She'd been my secret champion, the one person who made me feel seen and valued. At the reading of her will, I discovered just how much she'd understood my situation. She left me $50,000 with a note that read, "For my darling Alexa, who has always made her own way in the world. Use this to fly even higher." My parents were furious. They'd expected Grandma Rose to leave everything to the family, which in their minds meant them and Sophia. The drive home from the lawyer's office was filled with accusations. How had I manipulated Grandma Rose? What lies had I told her? Why was I always trying to steal from Sophia's future? When I pointed out that Grandma had also left Sophia $20,000, my mother snapped that it should have been equal at the very least. That night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. "She probably pressured Rose when she was vulnerable," my mother said. "Alexa's always been jealous of Sophia. This is just another way she's trying to hurt our family." My father agreed, adding that I'd shown my true colors by accepting the inheritance instead of sharing it with my sister. The fact that Sophia had already blown through her $20,000 on a shopping spree in Paris was conveniently ignored. 3 months before that fateful anniversary party, I experienced what I thought was rock bottom in my relationship with my parents, though I'd later learn they had so much further to sink. It was my 28th birthday, and true to form, my family had completely forgotten. I woke up that morning to silence, no texts, no calls, nothing. Jake made me breakfast in bed and gave me a beautiful pair of earrings he'd designed himself, but the absence of even a generic happy birthday text from my parents stung more than I wanted to admit. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, though, because that very same day, my parents decided to throw a surprise party for Sophia. Her big accomplishment? She'd just gotten a job as a receptionist at a dental office after being unemployed for 8 months. You'd have thought she'd been elected president from the fuss they made. I found out about the party when Sophia posted photos on social media, our parents beaming beside her as she cut into an elaborate 3-tier cake. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was that just a week earlier, I'd been promoted to senior manager at the Fortune 500 company where I worked. It came with a 6-figure salary, stock options, and a team of 12 people reporting to me. I was one of the youngest people to ever hold the position in the company's history, but my parents had no idea because they never asked about my career. To them, I was still just the difficult daughter who worked some office job in the city. Jake saw how much their neglect hurt me and planned an elaborate romantic dinner to make up for it. He'd made reservations at my favorite restaurant, arranged for the chef to prepare a special tasting menu, and even hired a violinist to play during dessert. I spent the afternoon getting ready, choosing a new dress that made me feel powerful and beautiful, trying to shake off the pain of being forgotten by the people who were supposed to love me most. Then, an hour before we were supposed to leave, Sophia called. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she only used when she wanted something. "Lexi, you have to come to family dinner tonight. Mom and Dad have a big announcement, and they specifically said they need both daughters there." When I explained I had plans, she laid on the guilt thick. "But it's my celebration dinner for my new job. Don't you want to support your little sister? Or are you really so selfish that you can't spare one evening for family?" Jake saw my face crumble and immediately offered to cancel our reservation. "We can celebrate this weekend," he said gently, though I could see the frustration in his eyes. He'd watched this pattern play out so many times, my family yanking my chain, me dropping everything to seek their approval that never came. But I couldn't shake the naive hope that maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd remember my birthday at dinner. Maybe they'd actually have good news to share that included me. The restaurant they'd chosen was, naturally, Sophia's favorite steakhouse. I wore my new dress anyway, clinging to some pathetic hope that someone might notice I'd dressed up. They didn't. Throughout appetizers and entrees, I listened to my parents praise Sophia's initiative, her dedication, her bright future in dental administration. When dessert arrived, my father stood up, clinking his glass for attention. "We have wonderful news to share," he announced, his face glowing with pride. To celebrate Sophia's entry into the professional world, we've decided to gift her the vacation home in Martha's Vineyard. We know she'll make wonderful memories there. The blood drained from my face. That house had been in our family for 3 generations. I'd spent every summer there as a child, learned to paint in the sunroom overlooking the ocean. I'd always dreamed of bringing my own children there someday. Sophia squealed with delight, jumping up to hug our parents while I sat frozen in my chair. Jake's hand found mine under the table as I struggled to process this latest betrayal. Finding my voice, I managed to croak out, That's very generous." Then, desperate to feel like I mattered at all, I added, "Actually, I have some news too. Jake and I are buying our first house. We close next month." The table went silent. My mother's face twisted into something ugly. "Must you always try to one-up your sister?" she hissed. "This is Sophia's moment. Why do you insist on making everything about you?" I stared at her in disbelief. I'd mentioned buying a house, not curing cancer. But in their eyes, any accomplishment of mine was seen as a direct attack on Sophia. "I'm not trying to," I began, but Sophia cut me off with crocodile tears. "She always does this," she wailed to our parents. "Every time something good happens to me, Alexa has to swoop in and steal the spotlight. Last week at yoga, she told everyone I was unemployed, trying to humiliate me. This was a complete fabrication. We didn't even go to the same yoga studio, and I never discussed my family with strangers. But the truth didn't matter. It never did when Sophia was crying. My parents immediately rushed to comfort her, shooting me disgusted looks. "Apologize to your sister," my father demanded. "I don't know why you're so threatened by her success, but this jealousy needs to stop." I opened my mouth to defend myself, to point out the absurdity of being jealous of a receptionist job when I was managing million-dollar accounts, but Jake squeezed my hand in warning. He knew, as I did, that logic and facts were useless weapons in this battle. "I'm sorry, Sophia," I said mechanically, the words ash in my mouth. She smirked at me over our mother's shoulder, victory gleaming in her eyes. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of further praise for Sophia and cold silence directed at me. As we were leaving, Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother, pulled me aside in the parking lot. "That was some bullshit in there," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "I see what they do to you, Alexa. Your grandma saw it too. Don't let them dim your light." He pressed a birthday card into my hand before walking away. I opened it in the car to find a heartfelt message and a check for $500. "Since I know they forgot," he'd written. "Proud of you, kiddo." Jake drove home in silence while I cried in the passenger seat, mourning not just the forgotten birthday or the lost vacation home, but the childhood I'd never had and the parents who would never love me the way they loved Sophia. I didn't know then that in just 3 months, they would publicly disown me in front of everyone we knew. If I had, maybe I would have started protecting my heart sooner. Or maybe I would have just loved them harder, desperate for scraps of affection that would never come. A week before my parents' anniversary party, Sophia showed up at my door unannounced. This was unusual for several reasons. First, she never visited my home, claiming it was too far from her favorite coffee shops. Second, she was alone, without the usual entourage of friends or our mother. Third, and most suspiciously, she was being nice. Sweet, even. My radar for manipulation immediately started pinging, but I'd been trained since childhood to give her the benefit of the doubt. "Hi, Lexi," she said, using my childhood nickname with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about our relationship lately, and I really want to mend bridges before Mom and Dad's big party. Can I come in?" Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her enter. Jake was at work, and something told me I'd regret being alone with her, but the part of me that still craved a real sister went out over caution. She gushed over my house as I led her to the kitchen, complimenting everything from the hardwood floors to the way I'd arranged the throw pillows. It was so over the top that warning bells started clanging in my head. Sophia had once told me my interior design taste looked like a grandma exploded, so this sudden appreciation for my decor felt false. Still, I offered her coffee and tried to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was genuinely trying to connect. "I'll take mine with oat milk and 2 sugars," she said sweetly, settling onto one of my bar stools. "Oh, and Lexi? Would you mind terribly making it in one of those cute mugs I saw in your cabinet? The blue ones with the gold rim." Those mugs were in my china cabinet in the dining room, meaning she'd been snooping before I'd even brought her to the kitchen. But I bit my tongue and went to make her coffee, telling myself I was being paranoid. While I busied myself with the espresso machine, grinding fresh beans and steaming milk, I heard her shift on the stool. "Your house is bigger than I expected," she called out. "Do you have a home office?" "I'm thinking of setting one up in my new place, for when I start my own business." This was news to me, but I answered honestly that yes, Jake and I had converted the 3rd bedroom into a shared office space. "Could I see it?" she asked when I returned with her coffee. "I need inspiration, and you've always been so good at organization." The compliment was so foreign coming from her that I almost dropped the mug. But again, that desperate hope that we could have a normal sisterly relationship overrode my instincts. "Sure," I said, leading her upstairs. Jake and I just finished reorganizing it last weekend. The office was my sanctuary, with built-in bookshelves, a large desk facing the window, and all my important documents neatly filed in a vintage filing cabinet I'd restored myself. Sophia made appropriate noises of admiration, asking questions about the desk chair, the lamp, the way I'd arranged my supplies. Then her phone rang. "Oh, it's Mom," she said, glancing at the screen. "I should take this." You know how she gets when I don't answer. "Would you mind giving me a minute?" I left her in my office and went back downstairs, already regretting this whole visit. Something felt off about her energy, the way her eyes had darted around the room, cataloging everything. I puttered in the kitchen, washing her coffee mug and trying to shake the feeling that I was being played. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. I was about to go check on her when she appeared at the top of the stairs. "Sorry about that," she said breezily. "You know how Mom can talk." "Hey, I should probably get going. Thanks for the coffee and the tour. I got some great ideas." She practically flew out the door, leaving me standing in my foyer with a growing sense of unease. I went up to check my office, but everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. 3 days later, I understood why. I'd been looking for a specific document about my promotion to show Jake, the one that outlined my new salary and benefits. I kept all my important papers in a folder marked Career, but when I opened it, the promotion letter was gone. So were several other documents, including performance reviews and bonus notifications. My blood ran cold as I searched frantically through every folder, every drawer, but they were definitely missing. Then I noticed other things. The pregnancy test I'd hidden in my desk drawer, the positive one I'd been waiting to surprise Jake with at the right moment, was gone. A pair of my grandmother's pearl earrings that I kept in a small jewelry box on my bookshelf had vanished. Most disturbing of all, my anniversary speech draft, where I'd planned to announce our pregnancy to the family, had disappeared from my laptop's desktop folder. Jake found me sitting on the office floor, surrounded by papers, trying not to hyperventilate. As I explained what was missing, his face grew darker. "We have security cameras," he said grimly. "Let me check the footage from when Sophia was here." What we found made my blood boil. The cameras clearly showed Sophia rifling through my desk the moment I'd left the room, photographing documents with her phone and pocketing items. "We need to tell your parents," Jake said, but I laughed bitterly. "Tell them what? That their golden child is a thief? They'll never believe me. They'll say I doctored the footage or that I'm trying to frame her." But Jake was already saving the files to multiple drives. Maybe they won't believe it, but we'll have proof when she inevitably tries something else. The next day, things escalated. My mother called, her voice arctic. "Sophia's diamond tennis bracelet is missing." The one we gave her for graduation. She says the last time she remembers wearing it was at your house last week. My mouth fell open. Mom, Sophia hasn't worn jewelry to my house. She was here 3 days ago, and I would have noticed a tennis bracelet. Are you calling your sister a liar? My mother snapped. She's devastated, Alexa. That bracelet meant the world to her. I'm sure if you look around, you'll find it somewhere. Maybe it fell between your couch cushions. The implication was clear: return the bracelet you stole, or else. When I protested my innocence, she cut me off. I don't want to hear excuses. Just find it and return it before the anniversary party. Or don't bother coming at all. After she hung up, I stood in my kitchen shaking with rage. Sophia had played this perfectly. She'd stolen from me, then preemptively accused me of theft to cover her tracks. Jake came home to find me stress baking my 4th batch of cookies. We're going to that party, he said firmly after I filled him in. And we're bringing the security footage. If they want to play dirty, we'll show everyone exactly who the real thief is. I should have been prepared for what came next, but somehow I still held on to hope that when presented with irrefutable evidence, my parents would finally see the truth. I saved the security footage to my phone, made backup copies, and even consulted with a lawyer friend about my options. The jewelry Sophia had planted, because of course she'd planted it, turned up in my dresser drawer 2 days before the party, exactly where she'd apparently told my mother it would be. The trap was set. Sophia had successfully painted me as a jealous thief who couldn't stand her success. My parents had banned me from their anniversary party, the social event of the year for their circle. Everyone who mattered would be there: family, friends, business associates, the entire country club set. And according to my mother's voicemail, if I showed my face, they'd have security escort me out. But I was done being the scapegoat. Done apologizing for sins I hadn't committed. Done watching Sophia manipulate our parents while they willingly played along. I had truth on my side, video evidence, and something Sophia didn't know about, a backbone I'd finally grown. The anniversary party would indeed be a night to remember, just not in the way anyone expected. The country club was lit up like a palace for my parents' 30th anniversary celebration. White lights twinkled in every tree, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the ballroom packed with over 200 guests. Everyone from their social circle had turned out: business partners, country club members, distant relatives who only appeared for major events, and family friends who'd known me since I was in diapers. Jake pulled into the valet line, his jaw tight with determination. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, though we both knew that was a lie. I did have to do this. Not for them, but for me. For the little girl who'd spent decades wondering why she wasn't enough. I smoothed down my emerald green dress, a designer piece I'd bought specifically for this moment. If I was going to be thrown out, I was going to look spectacular while it happened. The valet's eyes widened when he saw me, clearly recognizing me from the family photos displayed at club events. He knew I was persona non grata tonight. But Jake handed him the keys with a confidence that brooked no argument, and we swept past before he could alert anyone. My heels clicked against the marble floor as we entered the ballroom, heads turning like dominoes falling. The whispers started immediately. I spotted Aunt Helen clutching her pearls, Uncle James freezing mid-conversation with his golf buddies, and various cousins exchanging shocked glances. But I kept my head high, Jake's steadying presence beside me as we moved through the crowd. Then I saw them, my parents holding court near the anniversary cake, a towering 5-tier creation decorated with sugar flowers and gold leaf. My mother spotted me first. The champagne flute in her hand trembled as her face went from confusion to fury in the span of a heartbeat. She hissed something to my father, whose head snapped up, his face already flushing red. But before they could move, before security could be called, I was already there, standing in front of them with 20 years of hurt and rage barely contained beneath my polished exterior. "How dare you?" my mother whispered viciously, her voice low but venomous. "I explicitly told you not to come. This is our special night, and you're ruining it with your presence." Her fingers were white where they gripped the champagne flute, and I wondered if she might throw it at me. Around us, Guests pretended not to stare while hanging on every word. "I'm your daughter," I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. "I have every right to celebrate my parents' anniversary." My father stepped forward, his face now purple with rage. "Security will remove you in 2 minutes if you don't leave voluntarily," he threatened. "You're not welcome here, not after what you did to your sister." Speaking of Sophia, she materialized beside our parents like a perfectly timed stage entrance. She wore a white gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and around her neck glittered Grandma Rose's antique diamond necklace, the one that had disappeared from my safe 6 months ago. The sight of it made my blood boil. She'd not only stolen from me, but had the audacity to wear her theft in public. "Alexa," Sophia gasped theatrically, pressing a hand to her chest. "What are you doing here? After you stole from me? How could you show your face?" Tears appeared on cue, sliding perfectly down her cheeks without disturbing her makeup. Several nearby guests murmured sympathetically, and Mrs. Patterson, the biggest gossip in their social circle, was already typing furiously on her phone. That's when Cousin Linda appeared at my elbow, her phone discreetly recording. "Keep going," she whispered. "Everyone needs to see this." I hadn't counted on allies, but apparently I wasn't the only one who'd noticed the family dynamics. Uncle Robert stood near the stage, giving me an almost imperceptible nod of encouragement. My parents decided to take control of the narrative. My father clinked his fork against his glass, calling for attention. The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes turning toward our little family drama. "Friends, family," he began, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "We apologize for the disruption. As some of you know, we've had some difficulties with our eldest daughter." My mother took the microphone, her voice dripping with false sorrow. "It breaks our hearts, but sometimes family members grow apart. Sometimes you have to accept that not everyone shares your values of honesty and integrity." She paused, letting the implication sink in. "That's why tonight, as we celebrate 30 years of marriage, we want to honor the daughter who has brought us nothing but joy." She turned to Sophia, who was now crying more dramatically, playing the victim to perfection. "Sophia has been our light, our pride, our greatest accomplishment. If we're being honest," and here her voice took on a harder edge, "we often wish she was our only child. Life would have been so much simpler, so much happier." The words hit like physical blows, each one precisely aimed to cause maximum damage. The gasps from the crowd were audible now, no longer pretending polite disinterest. My godparents, the Johnsons, looked absolutely appalled. Dr. Johnson actually started moving toward the stage, but his wife held him back. Several of my colleagues from work were in attendance, invited because my parents had business dealings with our company, and I could see the shock on their faces. "That's enough," Jake said loudly, his voice cutting through the murmurs. But my parents weren't done. My father took the microphone back, his eyes locked on mine with pure disdain. "You want to know the truth?" he announced. "We've given Alexa every opportunity to be part of this family. We've forgiven her jealousy, her theft, her constant need to overshadow her sister. But she refuses to change." "The theft she mentioned," my mother added, gesturing to Sophia. "Our youngest daughter's graduation bracelet was found hidden in Alexa's drawer. We have texts, emails, years of documentation of her bullying and tormenting poor Sophia. And still, she shows up here, uninvited, trying to ruin our anniversary with her presence." Sophia took the microphone next, and I knew whatever came out of her mouth would be perfectly calculated for maximum sympathy. "I've tried so hard to have a relationship with my sister," she sobbed. "But she's always resented me. I can't help that Mom and Dad love me. I can't help that I've found success and happiness. I just wish she could be happy for me instead of trying to tear me down." The irony of her claiming success while wearing a receptionist name tag from the dental office was lost on most of the crowd, who were too caught up in the performance. But I noticed Uncle Robert's expression darkening, and several other relatives who actually knew me were exchanging skeptical glances. The Johnsons had moved closer, forming a subtle protective barrier between me and some of the more hostile crowd members. "Are you done?" I asked quietly when Sophia finally stopped talking. My voice carried in the silence that followed, and I saw my parents' faces shift from smug satisfaction to wary concern. They knew that tone. It was the same one I'd used when I'd announced I was going to college despite their lack of support, when I'd told them I was marrying Jake regardless of their disapproval. Because I have something to say too, I continued, pulling out my phone. And unlike the fiction you've just heard, I have proof. The ballroom's AV system was state-of-the-art, with screens positioned around the room for slideshows and speeches. It took me less than 30 seconds to connect my phone and pull up the security footage. Let me show you exactly who the real thief is in this family. The security footage filled every screen in the ballroom, crystal clear and undeniable. There was Sophia in my home office, methodically rifling through my desk drawers while I was downstairs making her coffee. The timestamp was visible, the high-definition cameras catching every detail as she photographed my private documents and slipped my grandmother's earrings into her pocket. The room was so quiet you could hear the soft clink of jewelry in the recording. That's fake. Sophia shrieked, her carefully maintained composure cracking. She doctored that footage. Everyone knows you can manipulate videos now. But the damage was already spreading through the crowd like wildfire. People who'd been ready to condemn me moments ago were now looking at her with new eyes, seeing the calculation behind the tears. I swiped to the next file, emails between Sophia and her friends that I'd legally obtained during my consultation with a lawyer. Let me read you some highlights, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone I'd commandeered. From Sophia to her friend Madison, dated 3 months ago, parents totally bought the story about Alexa bullying me at work. Like we even work in the same industry. Mom's already talking about changing her will. My mother's face had gone from red to white, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Or how about this one from last year? Convinced Mom that Alexa stole my bracelet. Planted it myself when I visited. You should see how guilty they're making her feel. It's hilarious. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and I saw several people pulling out their phones to record what was quickly becoming the scandal of the year. Those are private. Sophia lunged for my phone, but Jake stepped smoothly between us. Her mask had completely fallen now, revealing the ugly truth beneath. You had no right to go through my things. The irony of her statement, given the security footage still playing on loop, wasn't lost on anyone. Someone actually laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. Speaking of rights, I continued, pulling up my bank statements, let's talk about what my parents have given their daughters over the years. In the past 5 years alone, Sophia has received over $300,000 in cash, cars, vacation homes, and shopping sprees. Would you like to know what I received? I paused for dramatic effect. 12 birthday cards. No money, no gifts, just generic cards that weren't even signed half the time. Uncle Robert stepped forward, his voice booming. I can confirm this. I've watched this favoritism for 20 years. Rose saw it too, which is why she specifically left money to Alexa. She knew that child had been working 3 jobs to put herself through school while Sophia got a free ride. Aunt Martha joined him, nodding vigorously. We all saw it. We just kept quiet to keep the peace. But this has gone too far. But wait, I said, holding up my hand. There's more. Would you like to know why Sophia really needed that receptionist job? It's because she was fired from her last 3 positions. For theft. I pulled up the documentation I'd gathered, including police reports. $200 from the register at the boutique. A coworker's laptop at the marketing firm. And most recently, petty cash from the veterinary clinic. Each time, my parents paid to make it go away. The security guards had arrived, but they seemed unsure who they were supposed to be removing. The club president, Mr. Harrison, was watching the drama unfold with the expression of someone witnessing a 10-car pileup. My parents' carefully cultivated reputation was crumbling in real time, and everyone knew it. You're destroying our family. My mother screamed, abandoning all pretense of dignity. But I shook my head, finally feeling the strange calm that comes with speaking long-suppressed truth. No, Mom. You destroyed our family the day you decided Sophia was worth more than me. I'm just showing everyone the ruins. Then I played my final card. By the way, I should mention that I was recently promoted to vice president at my company. My salary is now $500,000 a year, plus stock options. I manage a department of 50 people and just closed a deal that will bring in $20 million in revenue. I let that sink in. But you wouldn't know that because you've never once asked about my career. Oh, and one more thing, I added, my hand moving to my stomach. Jake and I are expecting. You're going to be grandparents. Though I can't imagine why we'd want our child anywhere near people who've made it clear that some children are worth less than others based on nothing more than birth order and manipulation. The room erupted. Congratulations mixed with condemnations, people choosing sides in real time. The Johnsons rushed forward to embrace me, tears in their godmother's eyes. We're so proud of you, Mrs. Johnson whispered. And we'll be the best honorary grandparents that baby could ask for. This is all lies. Sophia screamed desperately. She's always been jealous of me. Mom, Dad, tell them. But our parents were standing frozen, their world collapsing around them. The facade they'd maintained for 30 years was gone, replaced by the ugly truth of their favoritism and enabling. She's mentally unstable. Sophia tried one last gambit. Last year, she had a cancer scare and used it to manipulate Grandma Rose into leaving her money. I actually laughed at that one. That was you, Sophia. You faked cancer for attention. I have the medical records you forged. Would you like me to share those too? My father finally found his voice, and it was pure venom. You're no daughter of mine, he spat. You've humiliated us, destroyed our reputation, ruined our anniversary. Get out. Get out and never come back. You're dead to us. My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of rage. Don't ever contact us again. Don't send pictures of the baby. Don't invite us to anything. As far as we're concerned, we have one daughter. Just one. Fine by me, I said, surprised by how little their final rejection hurt. Maybe because it was just making official what had always been true. But remember this moment. Remember that you chose the thief, the liar, the manipulator. And when she inevitably steals from you too, when you realize you've bet on the wrong daughter, remember that you did this to yourselves. 3 months after the anniversary debacle, I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. The weight of constantly seeking my parents' approval had lifted, and with it went years of anxiety and self-doubt. My work performance soared even higher, leading to another bonus and expanded responsibilities. The pregnancy was progressing beautifully, and Jake had transformed our spare bedroom into a nursery that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The family gossip network, which had always worked against me, was now working overtime in my favor. Uncle Robert had become my unofficial intel source, keeping me updated on the spectacular downfall of my parents' perfect life. It started small, with canceled country club invitations and cold shoulders at the golf course. But the real catastrophe was yet to come. You're not going to believe this, Uncle Robert said during one of our coffee meetings. He'd started checking in weekly, filling the void my parents had left with genuine care and ridiculously bad dad jokes. Sophia's been stealing from the family business. Your parents have been covering it up, but the accountant finally went to the board. I nearly choked on my latte. My parents owned a successful import-export business, built over 30 years of careful networking and reputation management. It was their pride and joy, worth several $1 million. How much? I asked, though part of me already knew Sophia's greed had no limits. 200,000 and counting, Robert said grimly. She had access to the company credit cards for marketing purposes and went wild. Luxury shopping sprees, first-class trips to Europe, even bought herself a new Mercedes and tried to write it off as a business expense. Your parents have been draining their retirement accounts to cover the shortfalls so the board wouldn't find out. The karma was so perfect it felt like fiction, but I had the paperwork to prove it was real. Robert showed me the forensic accounting report that had been submitted to the board. Sophia had been siphoning money for over 2 years, getting bolder as my parents continued to enable her. She'd even forged their signatures on several major transactions. The board wants her prosecuted, Robert continued. But your parents are begging for mercy. They've liquidated almost everything to pay back what she stole. The vacation home in Martha's Vineyard? Gone. Their investment portfolio? Cashed out. They're probably going to have to sell the main house too. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I felt sad. Not for them, but for the waste of it all. They'd had everything, a successful business, 2 daughters, financial security, and they'd thrown it all away for the illusion that Sophia was perfect. Now they were facing bankruptcy, and their golden child was facing jail time. 2 weeks later, I received a call from an unexpected source. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Peterson, whom I'd known since childhood. Alexa, I'm calling on behalf of your parents, he began carefully. They're in a difficult situation and need to liquidate some assets. They're aware you own commercial property in the city and were wondering if you'd consider a sale. I almost laughed at the audacity. The commercial property he was referring to was a small office building I'd purchased with my inheritance from Grandma Rose, combined with my savings and bonuses. It had been a smart investment, appreciating significantly in value. And now my parents wanted me to sell it to them for what I could only assume would be below market value. They can make an offer through my real estate attorney like anyone else, I replied coolly. Though I should mention I'm not particularly motivated to sell. The rental income is excellent, and the property value keeps climbing. There was a pause on the other end. They were hoping for a family discount, Peterson said, sounding embarrassed to even be asking. Family? I repeated. According to them, I'm not family. They made that very clear in front of 200 witnesses. They have 1 daughter, remember? Maybe she can help them. The silence stretched longer this time. Between us, Alexa, Sophia is the reason they need money. She's been arrested for identity theft. Apparently, she used your deceased cousin Terry's social security number to open credit accounts. The news should have shocked me, but it didn't. Of course, Sophia had escalated from simple theft to identity fraud. Of course, she'd chosen to exploit our cousin who died in a car accident 3 years ago. It was exactly the kind of heartless crime that my parents had enabled by never holding her accountable for smaller transgressions. How much is her bail? I asked out of morbid curiosity. $750,000, Peterson replied. Your parents put up their house as collateral. If she skips bail, they lose everything. I ended the call without making any promises, my mind reeling at how quickly their house of cards had collapsed. The next month brought even more dramatic developments. Local news picked up the story of the socialite arrested for identity theft and fraud. Sophia's mugshot was particularly unflattering, her usually perfect makeup replaced by smeared mascara and a sullen expression. The articles detailed her crimes, including the revelation that she'd stolen from multiple employers and had been operating various financial scams for years. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives and acquaintances who'd suddenly remembered I existed. Some offered genuine support and apologies for believing the lies about me. Others clearly wanted gossip or were angling for information about my parents' downfall. I ignored most of them, focusing instead on preparing for my daughter's arrival. Jake and I had decided to name her Rose, after my grandmother who'd seen the truth when no one else would. The nursery was finished in soft yellows and greens, filled with books and toys, and all the love we couldn't wait to shower on her. My real family, the one I'd chosen and who'd chosen me, rallied around us. The Johnsons threw us a beautiful baby shower, Uncle Robert built a custom crib, and Aunt Martha knitted enough blankets to last through college. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by courier with a return address from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside, my parents had penned a joint message, their desperation bleeding through every carefully worded line. They needed help. The business was in foreclosure. The house was being sold. Sophia's legal bills were mounting, and they'd spent everything trying to save her. We recognize we may have been hasty in our words at the anniversary party, they wrote. Perhaps we let emotions cloud our judgment. You're still our daughter, and surely you understand that family helps family in times of crisis. We're willing to discuss reconciliation if you can assist us through this temporary difficulty. The manipulative language was so transparent it was almost insulting. They weren't sorry. They didn't want me back. They wanted my money, my success, the very things they'd belittled and dismissed for years. The letter went on to detail exactly how much they needed and how quickly, with a veiled threat about how it would look if I let my elderly parents become homeless. I composed my response on official letterhead from my company, keeping it brief and professional. I included a single family photo, one taken at my baby shower with the Johnsons, Uncle Robert, Aunt Martha, and all the people who'd become my true family. At the bottom, I wrote one line, "I wish I had different parents too." Rose arrived on a spring morning, perfect and tiny and screaming with healthy lungs. Jake cried harder than I did when the doctor placed her on my chest, and in that moment, every wound my parents had inflicted felt worth it because it had led me here. Uncle Robert and Aunt Martha were in the waiting room with the Johnsons, our chosen family ready to welcome the newest member. The nurse asked if we wanted to add any other names to the list of approved visitors. I looked at Jake, and we both shook our head. My parents didn't even know I'd given birth. They were too busy dealing with Sophia's upcoming trial and their own financial ruin to remember their first grandchild was due. It was better this way, cleaner, safer for Rose. Those first weeks were a blur of feedings and diapers and overwhelming love. Rose had Jake's eyes and my stubborn chin, and she was absolutely perfect. The Johnsons visited daily, bringing casseroles and taking turns holding her while I showered. Uncle Robert installed baby gates and corner protectors throughout our house, going overboard in his role as protective great-uncle. The contrast between my life and my parents couldn't have been starker. While I was nestled in my beautiful home with my newborn daughter and loving husband, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, they were moving into a 2-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of town. The gossip network kept me informed. The business was gone, sold for pennies on the dollar to cover debts. The country club had revoked their membership when they couldn't pay dues. Sophia's trial made the news again. She'd been charged with multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, and embezzlement. The evidence was overwhelming, partly because she'd been sloppy and partly because my parents could no longer afford good lawyers to make it disappear. She was facing serious jail time, and there was talk of additional charges being filed as more victims came forward. "Your mom was at the grocery store yesterday," Aunt Martha told me during one of her visits. She was holding Rose while I folded tiny onesies. "She looks terrible, honestly. Aged 10 years in 6 months. The cashier says she tried to use an expired coupon and caused a scene when they wouldn't take it. The woman who used to spend thousands on designer handbags was now arguing over 50-cent coupons." The video from the anniversary party had gone viral in our social circle and beyond. Cousin Linda had posted it after getting my permission, and it had been shared thousands of times. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of me, with many people sharing their own stories of family favoritism and golden child dynamics. I received messages from people around the world who'd experienced similar situations. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Claire who'd been disowned by her parents 20 years ago for refusing to give her inheritance to her addict brother. "It gets easier," she wrote. "The family you choose will fill the spaces they left behind. Your daughter will grow up surrounded by love, real love, not the conditional kind. That's the greatest revenge of all." She was right. Rose was thriving, hitting all her milestones surrounded by people who celebrated each one. Her first smile was captured by Uncle Robert. Her first laugh happened in the Johnsons' garden. Aunt Martha was there for her first solid food, carefully spooning mashed sweet potato while Jake filmed. These were the moments my parents were missing, but they'd made their choice long ago. When Rose was 6 months old, I was featured in a Forbes article about young executives breaking barriers in corporate America. The piece mentioned my unconventional path, working multiple jobs through college without family support. It didn't name my parents, but anyone who knew the story could read between the lines. The article went viral in business circles, leading to speaking invitations and mentorship opportunities. That's when the final letter came. This time, it was just from my mother, her handwriting shaky and desperate. Sophia had been convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. My father had suffered a mild heart attack from the stress. They were living on Social Security, barely making ends meet. She begged to meet Rose, promised they'd learned their lesson, swore they'd be better grandparents than they were parents. I sat in my office, holding the letter while Rose napped in her swing beside my desk. The old me would have been tempted, would have felt guilty for their suffering. But motherhood had changed me. Looking at my innocent daughter, I knew I could never let them near her. They'd already shown how they treated daughters. Why would I give them a chance to break Rose's heart the way they'd broken mine? Instead of responding directly, I channeled my energy into something positive. I established the Rose Foundation, named after both my daughter and grandmother, dedicated to supporting young adults estranged from toxic families. We provided scholarships, temporary housing, and counseling services. The foundation's first fundraiser raised over $100,000, with Uncle Robert and the Johnsons leading the charge. During my speech at the fundraiser, I shared my story publicly for the first time beyond that viral video. Family estrangement isn't about punishment, I explained to the packed ballroom. It's about protection. It's about breaking cycles and choosing health over harm. It's about teaching our children that love shouldn't come with conditions or favoritism or manipulation. The foundation grew quickly, helping dozens of young people in its first year. I received letters from recipients who'd used our support to finish college, escape abusive situations, or simply find the therapy they needed to heal. Each success story felt like a small victory, proof that breaking away from toxic family could lead to beautiful things. On Rose's first birthday, we threw a huge party in our backyard. The Johnsons brought a cake shaped like a butterfly. Uncle Robert gave her a handmade rocking horse he'd spent months crafting. Aunt Martha presented a photo album filled with pictures from Rose's first year, every milestone lovingly documented. Jake's family had flown in from across the country, adding to our chosen family celebration. As I watched Rose toddle between the people who loved her unconditionally, who celebrated her existence without comparison or condition, I felt the last of my anger toward my parents dissolve. They'd made their choices, and those choices had consequences. They'd bet everything on their golden child and lost spectacularly. Meanwhile, the daughter they'd dismissed had built a life filled with genuine love, success, and happiness. 2 weeks after Rose's birthday, I saw my parents one last time. It wasn't planned. I was walking through the park with Rose in her stroller when I spotted them sitting on a bench. They looked old, defeated, shadows of the powerful people who'd once held court at country club galas. They were feeding pigeons from a bag of stale bread, and something about the scene was profoundly sad. My mother saw me first. Her eyes widened, taking in my designer clothes, the expensive stroller, the healthy glow of happiness I wore like armor. Then her gaze landed on Rose, and her face crumpled. My father looked up, and for a moment, time stopped. We stood there, 3 people who shared DNA but nothing else, separated by 20 feet and 28 years of dysfunction. Rose chose that moment to laugh, pointing at a dog walking by. The sound broke the spell. I could have stopped, could have let them meet her, could have offered some small mercy. But I thought of all the birthdays they'd forgotten, all the achievements they'd dismissed, all the love they'd withheld. I thought of how they'd publicly wished I'd never been born. And I kept walking. "Wait," my mother called out, her voice broken. "Please. Just let us see her." I paused but didn't turn around. "You already had 2 daughters," I said quietly. "You decided one wasn't worth loving. I won't let you make that mistake with mine." Then I walked away, pushing my daughter toward the playground where Uncle Robert was waiting to push her on the swings. That night, after Rose was asleep, I told Jake about the encounter. He held me while I cried, not from sadness, but from release. The little girl who desperately wanted her parents' love could finally rest. The woman I'd become didn't need anything from them anymore. I had everything I'd ever wanted. A loving partner, a beautiful daughter, a chosen family, and the knowledge that I'd broken the cycle. As I looked around my home, filled with photos of real moments with people who truly loved us, I realized the ultimate truth. They'd wished Sophia was their only child, and in the end, they got their wish. but I got something so much better. I got a life filled with authentic love, genuine connections, and the joy of raising my daughter in an environment where she'd never have to earn her place at the table. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when life gets hard. It's about who celebrates your victories without jealousy and supports you through failures without judgment. It's about building something beautiful from the ashes of what should have been. And sometimes, the best revenge really is simply living well without the people who never deserved you in the first place. Looking at Rose's nursery one more time before heading to bed, I whispered a promise to her sleeping form. She would always be enough, just as she was. She would never have to compete for love or attention. She would grow up knowing her worth wasn't dependent on being better or worse than anyone else. She would have the childhood I never did, surrounded by people who chose to love her. And that was the greatest victory of all. What would you have done if your parents publicly wished you'd never been born? How do you protect yourself and your children from toxic family members? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content about overcoming family trauma and building the life you deserve. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone in dealing with difficult family dynamics. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, the family that matters most is the one that celebrates your existence, not the one that wishes you away.